Thank you, Faisal. When I received this title, wherever it is, Suggestions for the Development of Personnel in the Procurement Agencies in the GCC countries, I thought of what my response was going to be was something like when my wife asked me if she's fat. There is no right. There's been a tremendous amount of development here, and there's oftentimes many answers for questions which are real, which have to be looked at as a way that is not at all viewed as being something pejorative. So all of my comments today should be viewed in the fact of as a husband who says to his wife that you're not fat, you could lose a little weight, you could do this or that. The first question that I think we have to ask ourselves when we look at any of this is, why do we have organ procurement agencies? And the answer is a relatively straightforward one. It's to get organs for the people who need them. The jobs are relatively simple. Identify donors, work within the law to obtain authorization, consent, assure testing is completed for both organ quality and risk, to communicate with the transplant centers, and then to coordinate the actual process to make sure that it's done efficiently, well, and within given standards in transportation of the organs to the recipients. So what are the impediments to provide organs for and to the people in this region? And what are the personnel-related issues that could go into dealing with those facts? So that yesterday you heard through the discussions through representatives from the different countries what some of the bottlenecks are that people perceive to be the issues. There's resource and availability of funding. That's something I don't think your personnel can do anything with. You can have lobbyists with the government to try to get some more funding or to change the model, but that has nothing to do with the personnel. The problem of donor identification is a major component that we'll talk about later. Public perception, religious and cultural disagreements about the notion of donation, and then the large percentage of expatriates within the GCC and the difficulties which are associated with that is sometimes to be addressed. And I want to talk about some of these as we go through. Donor identification is actually one of the major issues which needs to be done. Certainly when we were here in the mid-90s looking at how to identify donors and to find ways to obtain organs for the people, we went with regularity to the ICUs, talked about the concepts of brain death, and tried to find ways to identify the folks. There are two different models which have been used pretty much throughout the world. One is the system which we have in the United States, where it's the responsibility lies on the hospital or the staff of the hospital to pick up the phone or to do some sort of communication with the retrieving agency to say, there's somebody here who meets the criteria for brain death and can do it. Now, in the U.S., we've put some teeth behind it, where it's the law that imminent death or eligible donors have to be reported. How that's enforced is a different issue. That is basically an education-based model. And then there's the model that the Spanish have proposed, in which is to actually put personnel into the hospital who go around and survey the hospital to try to identify and to promote organ donation as it resides within the place. Now that requires the finances. With a single payer system such as Spain has, they're able to do that sort of event and put it into the budget of the hospital, is to have a donor coordinator inside. It is certainly something that makes much sense in large donor hospitals, and it probably makes much less sense in the smaller hospitals. What would work best in the GCC is not clear. You'd have to do the pros and cons between the voluntary reporting notion of the U.S. and most of North American related approaches and the embedded concepts of what the Spanish have proposed. However, without knowledge of what the potential is, it's very difficult to know where to concentrate your efforts, and all the work must be done with the authorities. Your unique problems here are several. One is that the hospital physicians that you work with are oftentimes expatriates and are not committed to national goals. So it's the alignment of the needs of the organ retrieval agencies with either the personal values of the hospital, the intensivist and the neurologist, is sometimes awkward. Oftentimes the donors are expatriates as well, and there's unique legal and social issues. I know that Scott has worked very diligently with working in relationships with the major embassies of the expatriate populations to try to make sure that whatever processes are done go forward are done in both legal and culturally appropriate manners. The lack of consistency, however, means that you're always relearning the model, because the turnover of the expatriate population makes it very difficult to maintain. And the importance of going forward for any organization such as Scott or for the other developing OPO systems within the Gulf is that you're going to need to continually maintain an institutional memory of organ donation. The social acceptance and laws still need to be there, and the healthcare system is still evolving. I would only encourage you to try to concentrate the areas where the donors are going to come. As far as I know, in the GCC, there is no trauma stratification system where you have level 1 trauma centers, 2, 3. And the benefit of identifying certain places with transport for level 1 trauma or neurosurgical and neurologic related emergencies would only help develop areas to focus areas for organ donation as well. Public opinion is very difficult to work with. There are a lot of things that compete for people's minds, and the big pressures that we've had in the United States to try to make organ donors have resulted in precious little change. I don't think it's a really useful exercise for you folks to do. Dedicated staff for the media is a real luxury. However, you do have to develop a consistent message whenever the idea of organ donation is coming forward, is that you have respect, that organ donation fits within the concept of your culture, that there's respect for the social process, and that we observe the bright line that that we take organs only from dead people, and that we are here to preserve life. It is crucial as we move forward that we are never viewed as a pariah on society taking organs. Overcoming religious bias is difficult. Arguing about religion, as you know, is rarely productive. In our country, we have tremendous discussions about of how our right-wing Christianity is to force social change. There's a lot of people who feel like we need to be protected from our own religion. In this country, I don't think you're quite to that extreme, but there are biases which are not necessarily founded upon religious principles. But there's no sense in arguing about it. It's not a place where you can really go. What we would do and what we would hope would be most successful is identify local imams who are at least sympathetic with the concept of organ donation, and to offer to tap into them for dealing with grieving families, not to necessarily try to coerce people into being donors, but certainly not to try to dissuade them from doing it. An official fatwa, although is useful, is very difficult to overcome local bias, and it's just something that's going to take time to deal with as a society. The most important part that I would suggest that you really do is invest in yourself. Know your product and work on quality improvement. That's something we have not done as well as we should in the U.S. Our donor management systems are real. The need to engage the intensivist community and the neurology community for both identification and management of donors is key. Staff education, investment in that is incredibly important. And outcomes for tracking and feedback are truly underused, at least in our country. Processes to improve organ function for the recipients, and as we talked about during this whole time, the tracking of untoward events, and particularly transmission of disease, needs to be done on every society, and it's becoming an international push. So it's really hard to know where you're going if you don't know. It's hard to get to where you're going if you don't know where you're headed. And there are a lot of conflicting signs which are out there, and that we have have a smoothly operating system does not produce the desired outcomes that we necessarily want. Our information is essential. We need to know the numbers of potential donors, support systems, the reasons of turn down, and quality of the donation needs to be looked at as well. Thank you.